Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2021 Watershed Congress. This is Thursday, day 4 of our virtual Watershed Congress week. We are happy that you are joining us today. The Watershed Congress is organized by the Delaware Riverkeeper Network in collaboration with many other organizations. My name is Brian Vedino, and I'm a watershed specialist with the Montgomery County Conservation District. I'm also your moderator for this session, entitled Dam Removal in the Brandywine-Christina Watershed, Lesson Learned. I'm now going to turn it over to our first presenter, Brian Winslow. Brian is a Watershed Conservation Director at Brandywine Red Clay Alliance, or BRC, and leads the Red Streams Blue Stream Restoration Program. Since 2008, BRC has completed 22 restoration projects on approximately 29,000 feet of streams. Brian is responsible for riparian buffer plantings, dam removals, and annual watershed cleanups. Brian co-leads the Christina Watershed Municipal Partnership, coordinating 38 municipalities and 8 conservation organizations, as well as the Christina Basin Task Force quarterly meetings. Okay, take it away, Brian.
All right, thank you, Brian. I'm actually sitting in for Dr. Jerry Kaufman for the first part of our presentation on the Brandywine River and Brandywine Shad 2020. Dr. Kaufman, as many of you know, is at University of Delaware Water Resources Center. He's part of the Biden School of Public Policy and Administration. And the University of Delaware is very involved in Shad 2021 in many levels and has done a lot of research before even Shad 2020 concepts. So I'm going to be presenting his slides, and then Craig Thomas will go ahead and present about a project upstream up in the Downingtown area dam, and I'll be back to present another dam removal in Pocopson Township. So here we go. So the Brandywine, for those of you who don't know, the Brandywine Creek, as we call it up here in Pennsylvania, tends to be called Brandywine River down in Wilmington, is of course part of the Delaware River Basin. It's the part of the Christina River Basin, and the Christina River Basin includes the Brandywine River Watershed, the Red Clay Creek Watershed, the White Clay Creek Watershed, and the Christina River. And so the Brandywine River Watershed or Creek Watershed starts up in the Welsh Hills or Welsh Mountains of Chester County, northern Chester County, where it's largely agricultural, including Amish farmers, works its way down through Downingtown and Coatesville and becomes more suburban, where it enters into Delaware, it becomes a little bit more urbanized. And then the river comes through Wilmington, joins the Christina right before it joins the Delaware River. It's a historically significant watershed, which I'll get to in just a minute. Brandywine Shad 2020 is an effort started by 2 citizens who live in Wilmington along the river, enjoy the river, and noticed about the dams and was watching shad and became interested in how can we help these anadromous fish return up the Brandywine. But like all these dam projects, there's so many other benefits. The shad is our charismatic species, I guess you'd say, for this, and includes the American shad and the hickory shad. Of course, there are other migratory fish. In fact, Jerry will remind us that the Lenny Lenape coined the name for the Brandywine menacing, which is river of the longfish, which probably refers to sturgeon coming up. So right now we have striped bass, eel, and other species that come up. But this effort has really gained a lot of momentum. It had an ambitious title of Brandywine 2020, hoping to have a significant amount of dams out by 2020. We now say it's a 2020 vision. It's been featured in the New York Times. It's been featured locally. The idea is to look at the 11 dams in Delaware and either remove those obstructions or provide fish passage so the shad can come back up. And I will say we're gathering great steam. Just Monday, when the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation announced its grants. And by the way, I think there were 7 or 8 grants for dam removal: New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware. Brandywine Shad 2020 got a grant for $455,000 to continue its study and planning for removal of these dams. Chris Coons announced that, and they had a nice press conference down there. This is a picture right here when Dam 1 was taken out. So one dam has been removed, and this worker on his coffee break went to fishing and caught a shad. So the shad come up to Dam 1, they're now up to Dam 2, which is the barrier. You may know the Brandywine. It's a historic creek. The Battle of the Brandywine was a critical battle. Beautiful stone structures. It's inspired art by Andrew Wyeth. If you've ever been to the Brandywine River Museum, they have wonderful art, all inspired by this beautiful Brandywine Valley. And the history of the shad dating back to the Native Americans, it was an important food source. So it's a historically and culturally significant waterway. The shad were so plentiful that they built these weirs, and this is all up and down the Atlantic, where the fish should be channeled into a narrow channel. And I remember reading one account where the Native Americans would spear the fish, and they'd take the spear and throw it over their shoulders, and the fish would fly off onto the shore where the kids would gather it to be processed and put on drying racks. So the shad are an important food source for Native Americans and early colonists. It was a huge fishing industry. The dams became important because as this area was settled and much of the North Atlantic, mid-Atlantic, the fall of the Brandywine all the way from the Welsh Shears in the north all the way to the Brandywine is actually greater than the Niagara Falls. The fall, and there were just hundreds of dams all the way up and down the Brandywine, with a heavy concentration in Wilmington. And of course, DuPont company really started as a gunpowder company in the early 1800s, and there are several dams still at that site, and it's still a research center there. And so the other thing, of course, Delaware recently received its first national park. First state national park is 1,100 acres on the Brandywine in Delaware. You can see from this slide the concentration of dams and raceways. We recently walked this area a week from Friday for a Christina River task force. It was amazing to think as you walk along this largely treed area that this was an industrial complex. This, for example, is the Bancroft Mill. This is dam number 3. Dam number 4 wasn't built till 1865. This was a textile mill. There were corn processing, grain processing, flour processing. This entire valley would have been lined with mills and raceways. Interestingly, by the way, Mr. Bancroft set aside the land because he was concerned about urbanization in the 1800s, and that land later became the first state national park. So pretty amazing connection to that land. When I was looking closer at this photo, this is dam number 2 in Wilmington. Looks like an older photo. It looks like people ice skating, I think, on the backwater of the dam. I don't think that's happening now with climate change. The shad are in the stream. We know from work done on the Musconectong in New Jersey and the Potomac that the shad will return. That when the dams are removed, they will return, they will spawn. But shad numbers in the Brandywine in particular here have dropped, while in other migratory fish, the striped bass have increased. There is some concern that the striped bass are feeding on the juvenile shad, but there's a lot of other things threatening shad in their migratory route and even in the ocean as a feeder fish. They are an important feeder fish for many ocean fish. So the dams you can see here, these are the 11 dams. So this dam was removed, which I'll show you a few pictures. We're down to dam 2. They go up and all the way up the Brandywine Creek. This is the DuPont complex. These dams are historic and unlikely to be removed. Dam number 2 is also unlikely to be removed because it's a water source, so we'll be looking at fish passage. This is the last dam right before Brandywine Creek State Park, and then the first state national monument is up here before we get into Pennsylvania. And this shows you that fall of the stream and why it was so attractive as a power source. So University of Delaware has done a lot of research, modeling. They're working with engineers, looking at sediment, looking at temperature, looking at the effect of when a dam comes out. This is dam number 1. It had a water main that came through it. The water main needed to be replaced, and the city and Brandywine Shad 2020 used this opportunity to remove the water main as an obstruction in the remainder of the dam. My understanding is it was about $500,000 to remove and relocate the water main, and another $500,000 to remove the rest of the dam. So that is gone, and the fish now can move about another half a mile upstream. And we're now at the second dam, where University of Delaware and especially are doing research with students on the juvenile spawning. And they're working with different groups in the city of Wilmington as well as fishermen, and just recently caught 150 juveniles. So they are every 2 weeks. They monitor and catch the shad, they catalog them. And so there is research being done on the species. And you can see here, it's not just shad, but other species that are coming up. As far as fish passage go, one of the challenges with shad are that they are not like salmon. They don't jump. They can swim upstream 8 feet per second. So they need more of a rock ramp with an more like a 20 or 30 to 1 ratio. So they're very strong swimmers, but they can't jump. So early fish ladders didn't work. So this is some studies of some potential fish passages that include boulders where the fish can rest and then continue upstream. So these are some of the strategies being looked at as well. And I know that Craig has some additional information about fish passage structures. So going upstream, it looks like dam number 3 is breached enough that my understanding is once 2 is taken out, they're going to see how much the shad can make it through this rapids below this breached dam. And a lot of us believe that the shad will be able to migrate that with very little or none removal here. Dam number 4 is interesting because it has a lot of undercutting and is a dangerous dam. And so it's going to be one that has some real structural issues. Dam number 6 at DuPont is breached, but my understanding is some of the other DuPont dams may not be able to be removed. So it's a large study taking place, looking at all the dams and the impacts, including sediment as well as downstream impacts. That's the end of my presentation for the Delaware portion of the dam removal. So Brian, I'll let you turn it over to introduce Craig, and I'll stop my screen share.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. That was fantastic. I'm now going to turn it over to our second presenter, Craig Thomas, for his session. Craig is the Engineering and Operations Manager for the Chester County Water Resources Authority and principally works on projects related to dam safety and management for the authority's 4 flood control dams and water supply reservoir. Before joining the Water Resources Authority, Craig served as a soil conservation specialist with the Peace Corps in Botswana. Take it away, Craig.
Thank you very much, Brian. Good afternoon, everybody. As Brian mentioned, my name is Craig Thomas, and I'm with the Chester County Water Resources Authority. And what I'd like to do is share with you today a project that we completed in 2018. And this is up in the upper part of the watershed where Brian just described the Delaware portion. This is maybe 15 or 20 miles north on the East Branch Brandywine Creek. And the county removed with support from a number of agencies, and I'll touch on that in a moment, a low head dam principally for public safety reasons. Brian just walked through a lot of the environmental and habitat and fish, especially, of course, the shad. But from our perspective, I wanted to share really a lot of the public safety issues that we felt were the driving force. Now, we did consider environmental benefit as one of our objectives, as well as an interpretive signage for the historic mill and the mill race. But really, public safety is where we came down on. And I did want to mention that we're very fortunate to have our good partnership. We worked with the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, and actually the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation provided the funding for the dam removal. They needed to mitigate some work, and we were eligible to capture some of that funding. On the second line of my slide, you can see the owners of the dam. On one bank, it was the Downing Ridge Homeowners Association, and on the left bank, it was the County of Chester. We are the Chester County Water Resources Authority. We provide, in addition to our flood control and reservoir management, we work as a line agency within the county doing planning, providing resources to municipalities and nonprofits on different water resources functions. And we have a really strong program with the U.S. Geological Survey that's been going on for over 40 years, almost 50 years actually, but probably over 50 years now, looking at water resources investigations. The team on the analysis and removal of the project included Gannett Fleming, as well as American Rivers. River Logic Solutions was the actual contractor, and Princeton Hydro was the design firm for the project. So what we had is a fairly small dam, maybe 3 feet tall, stretched across the river, built in 1917. And we are a few miles north of Downingtown Borough, if you're familiar with the area. And the dam was built, as I mentioned, in 17, and it was abandoned in the 1970s. No more operation, no more maintenance. Basically, the need of the dam to provide the water supply, the water power, I gather, was not necessary anymore. So the dam was abandoned, and the county acquired the land that the dam sits on in 1982 as part of the Struble Trail project. The county did not actively look to acquire the dam, but it was part and parcel with the land that we needed for the trail. In 2010, Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, Division of Dam Safety, notified the county that we were considered a co-owner of this dam. On our bank, it was on county land, and on the right side, it was with the Homeowners Association. And it took a number of years, and I'll walk through a little bit of our process. But in 2018, the dam was removed by American Rivers, again with funding through PennDOT in consultation or coordination with the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. So I mentioned that the county acquired the dam became the owner of record, one of the owners of record, pardon me, for the dam in 2010. And the first stage was to do an assessment of what we had and to look at alternatives for what options we had with the dam. So the DEP letter came in January of 2010, and 5 months later, we had a dam safety engineer from Gannett Fleming did a engineering inspection of the structure. And we actually ended up continuing this annually until the dam was removed, basically treating it as an asset and making sure that the dam was inspected and maintained as necessary until we had a plan in place for the long-term decision. Also, immediately upon getting hold of the DEP letter, the county began doing a record search and a property evaluation to see if there was any other parties that might be available to help share the burden, or if there might be somebody who would be interested in having us transfer ownership of the dam to them. So that was an initial data collection period. Along the way, we installed Fish and Boat Commission and recommended signs to make people aware of what was going on. And then we started the the phase of trying to determine ownership, and then what would be the future for this dam? Would it be maintained as is? Would it be breached? And while the dam itself doesn't look menacing, as a matter of fact, it was a very popular recreation spot, both for fishermen and for residents who enjoyed just playing in the water. It's popular in the summer because it was right off of the trail, and it was a long-term spot for people to visit and get into the water. In fact, it's a very dangerous circumstance. These low-head dams have a lot of problems, and they have a lot of hidden dangers. After a storm event, there is a tremendous amount of energy in the area immediately downstream of the dam, and that causes terrible problems, which we'll get into. There's also, as you can kind of see in the middle of this photo on the right, there's some submerged logs that are partially submerged, but they also cause problems for people getting caught up in those circumstances. So this is an image shared by Gannett Fleming from the Journal of Dam Safety. And as you can see, killer dams. These low-head dams have a lot of nicknames, and frankly, none of them are good. So dam safety and public safety was really our consideration number one. Unfortunately, in 2009, there was a fatality in Chester County at a low-head dam. It wasn't at this dam, but it was in the news. It was something that we were mindful of. There was fatalities also in Montgomery County. And these are not issues that have gone away in time. Just this past June in North Carolina, a family was visiting from Indiana, and there were 5 fatalities at a low-head dam during an accident. And this is something that happens all too often. I'm sharing some slides from Paul Schweiger. Paul is a dam safety engineer with Gannett Fleming. He gave a presentation not too long ago to the Pennsylvania section of the American Water Resources Association. And I have some slides that I just wanted to credit him on. I mentioned that there is a real risk just below the dam, at the toe of the dam, during or immediately following a storm. During a storm, I don't think we'd have people out recreating along the creek, but shortly after a storm, people will get into the creeks, and there's what's called a hydraulic roller. And the illustration kind of shows that people can get caught up. It's too deep to stand in. The water is moving fast, but there's actually a reverse cycle that goes on where people will, when they get to the surface, will be pulled back towards the dam and then resubmerged. Couple that with possible obstructions for footing, it makes it very difficult for people to get captured to get out of this circumstance. Compounding that problem is that these low-head dams are often hidden for people coming from upstream to downstream. If they don't know the area well, if they're not familiar with the site, you can be on top of a dam almost before you realize that it's there. Going over the dam, getting caught. So the nature of the dams are very difficult, and that's why signage is one of the things the Fish and Boat Commission recommends. I mentioned killer dams as one of the nicknames. Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission calls them monstrous death traps. And just to kind of highlight the risk that goes on here, in Ohio, there were 9 firefighters and police officers who had died over a 2-year period, I believe, trying to do fast water rescue attempts. Now, not all of these were at low-head dams, but just to impress upon that it's how many people are at risk. It's not just the people recreating along the creek, but it's also people who are called to help those who are in trouble, that are put at risk by these dams. A quick illustration of our region, the map on the right. This is from research by Dr. Bruce Tance. Actually, it's from his journal article in the Journal of Dam Safety. And Pennsylvania is one of the states with the 3 highest documented fatalities since the 60s. Pennsylvania has over 21 documented fatalities at dams, and you can see Maryland and Delaware. Our region is has a number of fatalities. So it's widespread, but there is an issue here in Pennsylvania. I mentioned briefly signage. We installed signs at the access areas to the dams to discourage people from getting up against the dam. There's also signage placed upstream and downstream for boaters to try to call their attention to the fact that there was a low-head dam up in the vicinity. I mentioned before that one of the first things we did was a safety inspection, and we continue that annually through the life of the dam. Here we have our inspector. He's wearing a PFD, just so that you're aware. He's conducting his inspection, and it's not just the items that you see on the surface. Here we see the abutment, a cavity. Brian showed a photo from a dam in Newcastle County where there was a big cavity in the actual dam itself. Here we see them on the abutment. We also had erosion along the crest of the dam. It was just slowly eating away at the dam itself. And those are things that you can spot on the surface, but the bigger issue really is what's hidden from view. And here the engineer is walking along the toe of the dam and checking out the foundation. And just like a house or any building, dam needs to be built on a solid foundation. It's a lot of weight. It's subject to a lot of force. And you can see in this photo, we had a 4-foot undermining of the dam. In this photo, there was a 3-foot undermining of the dam. So it's that's a big issue. I didn't include a photo here, but there's also in the inspection found photos of submerged logs and other things that would entrap people who might be recreating in that area. So what I'd like to do now is share a video. It's a stop motion video, so it's a little bit choppy, and I'll narrate this as we go. So the dam was demolished in 2018, and what we did is we set up a trail camera to capture a photo every minute, and it was then stitched together into this little stop motion video now of the dam being removed in January of 2018. Again, a photo taken every minute and then stitched together to provide this little video. We needed to pull some permits for this project, and the two that I would have known about from the beginning was permit from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's Division of Dam Safety, as well as the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. But what I hadn't considered is that we also needed to coordinate, I should say, with the Chester County Preservation Coordinator to determine if there was any historic or cultural preservation issues that needed to be addressed. We were fortunate that we were able to complete this project without getting a federal permit, but that is one of the items that could have come into play is getting those types of permits. The entire project cost $300,000 from start to finish, or I should say, for the actual removal of the dam. That's engineering, design, permitting, and the actual construction itself, and the actual demolition itself. Some of the lessons learned to share are public outreach. Not everybody will be happy with the dam being removed, even if there is a safety concern and documented fatalities in the county. There's still pushback on whether the dam should be removed. So one of my recommendations is to reach out to the community members, the municipalities, local governments, and let them know what's going on and why the decisions are being made, because there's a chance for a lot of misinformation to spread. Again, check with your local or state historic preservation office to see if there's any additional clearances or permits that would be needed. In this case, we were right next to a trail in an area where the public frequently visits, even during the winter. So I would recommend putting up fencing or some other type of barriers to keep the public out. It's not uncommon for the public to feel like, hey, we've been coming here for years. We're going to come right up to the construction area when work is going on, which is always a bit dangerous. And then even after the project's finished, there's the chance for continued maintenance for a number of years until the stream channel has restored itself. So even when the project's quote done, there's still a period of time that you have to be monitoring and keeping an eye on things to address any issues. I'll wrap up with a few photos here of before and after. And then I mentioned earlier our interpretive sign. This is placed along the trail to let people know what happened. It talks about the old mill, provides a little illustration of the mill race and the timeline of what was going on. And then Brian mentioned the fish passage options. You can't always remove a dam. Historic reasons, they're currently in use. Brian mentioned that there's a dam being used for water supply in Newcastle County. So there are options. And just as Brian mentioned, a stone ramp is a real common one. And I just thought I'd show a couple of photos and an illustration. Now this is not as long as we would need for the Shad, but it does remove the public safety issue. By putting in these rocks, it also, in addition to helping fish passage, it also helps with public safety issues. So again, I'd like to recognize our project partners, and my name is Craig Thomas, and I'm at cthomas@chesco.org. Please feel free to email if you have any questions that we don't cover at the end of the presentation. And with that, Brian, I will hand that back to you.
Thank you, Craig. And
Thank you very much. At this point, we'll have another 15 minutes, and we're going to turn things back over to Brian Winslow. And Brian, you should have about 15 minutes before we break for questions and answers at the end. And just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to post those in the Q&A, and we will be addressing those questions when Brian Winslow is finished with this next segment. Thanks again, and back over to you, Brian.
great, thank you, Brian. Screen. So, Craig, thank you for your presentation. Jan Bowers gave that presentation at one of our meetings, and it was an inspiration to us. And then about a year later, when the Lenape Cabin Club was looking for a conservation partner to help them remove their dam, which I'm going to present on, Jan suggested that Brandywine Red Clay Alliance become involved. So they had reached out to the conservation community after doing some of the assessment and engineering work, and I'll go through that, and that's how we got involved. So I want to start with this video. So our project, the removal of the dam, was funded by the Cabin Club at about $57,000, $54,000 that they did in research and engineering. And then the grant was $57,000 to remove the dam, so about $114,000 total project cost. And it included, allowed us to prepare this video. So I'm going to show this 5-minute video, almost 6-minute video about the dam removal. Here we go. Someone just give me a thumbs up to let me know it's playing.
The dam removal project was important to BRC because we had a landowner that was willing to do the right thing, that was in a dilemma, and that was a Cabin Club. But I thought it was a great opportunity for BRC to help them navigate the system and try and get the funding in place. What BRC is secretly hoping is that this serves as a catalyst for other dams to come down in the Brandywine and other streams in the Delaware River watershed.
Brandywine Red Clay Alliance got involved at the request of the Lenape Cabin Club HOA.
The dam wasn't supposed to be a dam, and there was never a dam there going back into the 40s. Basically, it was what they call breakout. Every time we got high water or a flood, it broke a little bit more out and more out. And the Lenape Park was right down the creek from us, which had a dam, and they used the creek, the park, and the owner of the land got together and let the park start blocking up the outbreak.
You look back and you know, even up into the 70s and 80s, people were installing dams, and dams were looked as a good thing. And they served their purpose back then, but now, you know, most of the dams, we have hundreds of old mill dams, you know, in Chester County, thousands in Pennsylvania, that really don't serve a purpose anymore.
They basically flooded the old pool and riffle section, which is the native habitat of the streams here in the Piedmont. And the second thing is the water behind the dams warm up during the summer. So you only have like the warm water fish species. You don't have the more sensitive species like the trout and the anadromous fish that require high dissolved oxygen.
In a natural river system, you typically have, a series of pools, and then they come to a riffle, and then they have like a run behind the riffle. And that's great because it provides different types of habitat for different organisms. When you have a dam, you take what might be several series of riffle run pool complexes, and you basically make it one large, long pool. You also look at a river system, and every time you have a dam, that kind of serves as a bookend, upstream and downstream, of organisms being able to move about. You have species like shad that come in from the Delaware Bay, trying to come upstream. They spawn up in these freshwaters. If the dams are there, they're not able to get upstream.
The safety hazard on the dam was, especially with the breach, was terrible, because the water was a jet stream going through there. That a canoe or a kayaker didn't go through there and either turn over or lose their paddles or do something. I know of at least 6 times last summer that the members of the cabin club had to go in and rescue.
So what BRC brought to this project was, once the design and permit was completed by the HOA, we were able to take that and go and apply for funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which we received. We were able to take that project to bid, and Flyway Excavating won the contract to remove the dam. And we were really fortunate because they have more experience than almost any other company removing dams in Pennsylvania. Working with our engineer, Paul Haggerty, and Wolf Bioservices, we worked as a team to remove that dam and meet the permit qualifications. It took about a week and a half to get that dam out. And they brought in 2 large excavators, and they actually flattened out the top of the dam and drove out to the end of the dam with 2 excavators. One would pick the rock and move it to the next excavator that then would pick it up and put it near the shoreline. And we were able to also use that stone to armor the bank, to fortify the bank for any future erosion. We removed any material that wasn't natural. And so any of the metal, any of the old gabion baskets, any of the cement pieces came out of there. So we could restore the stream back to its natural state, and that was our goal.
History has shown us people take care of what they enjoy. So that's an important thing, is to reconnect people to the outdoors. And I think by removing this dam, it's going to create safe recreational opportunities along the Brandywine.
Ultimately, these dam removals, it helps to restore the river flow to the natural regime, and promotes just a holistic, functioning natural ecosystem.
It's good it came out, and it's creating a lot of momentum downstream, I can tell you, because there's a race to come up and meet down, and one day those fish will be swimming right by here, which would be the amazing thing.
To me, the most gratifying thing about this project is a lot of our projects on stream restoration take time. We plant trees, we restore the channel, and the channel recovers over time. This project had such immediate gratification to see the stone removed and the stream run free again. When Jan Bowers took out the dam up in Downingtown, she said you could hear the stream breathe, you could hear it flow again, and that's exactly how it feels when you go out there now. If you had seen the before pictures and you now see this free-flowing stream, that's the way it belongs. And nature has an amazing way of recovering, and it will recover that channel to a natural stream channel the way it belongs.
Great. Hope you enjoyed that. That was appreciate National Fish and Wildlife support of this project. That was part of the federal funding for the Delaware River watershed, and I noticed several projects funded in this new round by National Fish and Wildlife for dam removal. What I want to do now is I want to share a little more details on this project, and we can then get into the Q&A. So let me get this started here. So that showed you quite a bit of the dam presentation and the video. I'm going to get into some of the details here. Again, our team was the Cabin Club. I'll get into how they were established as the owner. We got involved. Haggerty Environmental did the engineering and a lot of assessment work. Wes Wolf Bioservices, Flyway was the excavator. So we are located, just a couple miles north of Route 1. This is the Brandywine Creek right here at the top left corner is where the east and west branches come together. If any of you know this geography, you may know this old Brandywine Picnic Park or Lenape Picnic Park. Well over 100 years ago, this was an amusement park that had everything from roller coaster, carousels, petting zoo, and all of that. And that really was probably the source of this dam. This dam was created, well, I should go back. We believe that this channel actually was a mill race, and there was a mill here before the picnic park came in. The picnic park came in and then built up this dam. And because the water then started to go into the mill race, built a second dam here that created an impoundment of water that was an attraction for the picnic park. They had paddle boats, canoes. I also heard they had party boats going up and down the river, the creek. There was then cabins built on this shore. This is the Lenape Cabin Club, the folks who owned the dam. There was a section of cabins here and here, all the way back into the early 1900s. And this is the dam that we were working to remove, which we believe was on the main channel. And so this is what the dam looks like from an aerial photograph. 280 feet long. It was not any concrete. It was all rubble, just materials they could throw in. We found railroad ties, railroad rails, gabion baskets at the end. And every time it was breached, they would throw more material in. This breach in particular was the site that was especially dangerous. And you can see what it looked like in the summertime. You could walk out on it in the wintertime. And we they also were advised to put up the danger signs at the dam above stream and downstream. There actually, sadly, was a fatality on this dam. A canoer got trapped underwater on one of this debris and couldn't surface. The other dam is where someone went over in a kayak and there was a fatality. So this was a real safety concern. The other safety concern was this. So when you take that much water and force it through an 18-foot gap, tremendous velocity, and this breach was caused when a tree fell over. And one of the rescue stories we heard was a tubing activity. And as Craig said, it looks like a pretty benign, a safe section of stream, but this tuber tried to navigate through here. 16-year-old, not a young kid, got his tube stuck on a tree with his head partially underwater. And if it weren't for one of the cabin owners who regularly would watch and look out for people in danger, rescuing him, he probably would have perished. So you could see all this danger and debris and the danger of that. This is a picture of the Cabin Club. Sadly to say, this is pre-Hurricane Ida. It doesn't look like this anymore. Substantial damage when Hurricane Ida came in. You see the high water mark here? Hurricane Ida, this cabin is now condemned. It's crumpled. The water came up almost 8 feet here. 3 of the cabins on this side washed away. The one cabin that was on pillars next to the dam was lifted off and dropped in the driveway. So they're in the floodplain and they did suffer substantial damage there. But getting back to the dam removal, if you remember the slide showing the dam, they had an arrangement with the picnic park that the picnic park could maintain the dam, which is essentially adding more rubble every time it breached. They would bring in more stone. The Cabin Club really, I don't think, was aware that they owned the dam until they got a very similar letter that the county got saying, you own this dam, and by the way, it's in violation and it must be repaired, either replaced, not repaired. That's important, not repaired, replaced or removed. You can no longer continue to just throw rubble in. And that's when the Cabin Club, in addition to the safety hazards, really got involved and we've got to get this thing out. So there was a sense of urgency here. Looking from the air, here's the dam. This is the breach. You can see where the creek wants to cut through wherever it can during high water. This is the dam structure that had to be removed. And the DEP again, said it had to be removed. The other option was to replace it. In modern standards would cost over $2 million. And I could say that our organization would not support the construction of a new dam for purely recreational purposes. So the benefits are, as we mentioned, to the safety, the ecological benefits. This was a slow moving backwater, low oxygen, high temperature. Corey did a nice job of talking about the dams acting as bookends. We know that one of the canoe liveries no longer allowed their canoe people to canoe this section because of the danger of the dam. And we're pleased to hear in this new round of grants, Brandywine Conservancy got a grant to remove the Hoffman Dam down near Route 1. So we are working from Pennsylvania down into Delaware to hopefully remove those dams. And this is a photo of a shad in Wilmington, but they can and used to come all the way into Pennsylvania if those obstructions are removed. Again, the funder was the Fish and Wildlife Foundation. The Cabin Club spent a lot of money on research, and actually at one point they looked into, can we repair the dam? And of course that was excused pretty quickly. I think the aerial photographs really show you about the dam removal. I was not able to get a time-lapse camera up in time. These guys got this dam out in 5 work days. So the actual removal is the shortest part, as you can imagine, of the project. And they made quick work of it because there was no jackhammering to remove concrete. You can see here all of the unnatural debris that was removed and the gabion baskets. The extra stone was put on shore. That saved a tremendous amount of money for trucking and provided some shoreline protection here. This is the aerial photo, which you all saw in the video. Right now, afterwards, it's simply a riffle there. So, and even after the Ida flood, it looks the same. I thought there would be some change in the channel, but not really much. The lessons we learned, as Craig mentioned, people are attached to these dams and the backwater behind them. I would put it this way. For this community, when we showed up the day to remove the dam with the dozers, and we did it in February, winter was a good time to do this work. It was out by March. I was excited, right, to see this dam come out. And one of the people said, Brian, you don't understand. This is where we used to canoe. This is where we used to swim. And it reminds me of that big oak tree that's hanging over your house that you love, but you know it can't stay there any longer. And the day they cut it down is a sad day. And you hate to see the oak tree go, but you know it's needed. And I would say that's how the Cabin Club felt about the dam coming out. And so the losers, I guess, the people who had the most to lose were the cabins across the stream. They were on the channel, remember, that went to the picnic park. Now, the truth is the water had already dropped 18 to 24 inches during the breach. And we know that because we were able to see that on the shore. There was a piece of debris, and the water only dropped 8 more inches. Sadly, though, they would no longer have water in front of their cabins year-round, only during high water stage. But we had to convince them that there were no other options. One of the things that Craig emphasized was communication. We had, because we came in so late in the game, we had thought that the HOA had talked to the Cabin Club on the other side. We went to start our project and there became a Facebook flurry about, can you believe they're taking the dam out? It's unfair. We'll no longer have water in front of our cabins. So we pulled back, we delayed the project, we did a virtual town meeting. And I won't say that we satisfied we couldn't return water to their stream, but we were able to tell them why it was needed to be done, why legally it had to be removed, and why repairing it the old way is no longer possible. So you can never have too much communication. And I give our executive director a lot of credit for saying, we got to stop this project and talk to the neighbors. So we did offer that if there was any stream restoration that we could do, we would do that in front of their cottages, but we were careful to say it's not likely that there will be permanent flow there. And then the last thing I will say is, as an organization that does stream restoration, we do occasionally come across small dams, and we recently removed one at Ansonby Nixon Park on the Red Clay Creek that was maybe 30 feet long, an old water dam. So sometimes these dams also obstruct smaller tributaries. or even still impede the free flow of the stream. So we do get involved occasionally removing the remnants of dams. So important topic that's out there. And I'm going to end the presentation right there where we can take questions.
Thanks, Brian and Craig. Brian and I are going to maybe sort of tag team with some questions right now that we may have for you. I wanted to ask if any of the dam rules that you talked about where you've got landowners, has there sort of been any follow-up in relation to like now the extended footprint that they may own, and what might be done as far as plantings in that area, addressing what comes in where an impoundment was, and that can be to both of you to speak to.
Go ahead, Craig.
Well, on the project I spoke about up north of Downtown Borough, we haven't done any outreach to the owners of the properties that were up against the old impoundment. One side is county owned, so that's been managed sort of in par. But on the other side, what we've been observing is some sediment deposits as the stream channel restores itself. But we haven't done an effort to do work or to do outreach with property owners there that I'm aware of, at least. There's a chance that the homeowners association, which does have the property on that side, has been doing something, but I'm not personally aware of that. Brian?
Yeah, well, to start with, we did call Ernst Conservation Seed, who provides live stakes, and many of you know that company, and they had, I was not surprised, they had a product of a live stake that was engineered for riprap areas, because it was pretty tough area to put live stakes, and they're doing quite well. Sherry, because it was an impoundment behind the stream, really what most homeowners had was a hardened bank with like docks and concrete, and they would fish or swim from there. And so if you imagine 2.5 feet of water drop, hopefully we can work with them and to soften that edge, because it's just a lot of concrete and rubble and things that they put in there. So still more work to be done as far as that goes. Good, that's a good point.
So we have a question from Robin, and maybe gives an opportunity to clarify. Robin is asking about strategies for the, with the mention of IDA strategies for flood control. And just to clarify, says as these are run-of-the-river dams, so you want to speak to the impact that a run-of-the-river dam actually has on keeping the area behind it artificially at bankful, and how these are not structures that are not, they haven't had a positive impact. There hasn't been any flood control in relation to these structures that are being removed.
That's right. These dams are not flood control dams. There are some flood control dams in Chester County and throughout the Schuylkill and Delaware River. These dams don't have any flood capacity during a storm event, even a small storm, but especially in a storm like Ida. What would happen is with the pool being artificially elevated, or with the stream being artificially elevated, floodwaters would have much quicker access to the floodplains than they do under the system where the dam has been breached. So there's probably a small net positive in terms of flood management with the dam being removed. Anytime you can get the stream back to a more natural setting and better connection to a floodplain is generally a good thing. So having the dam artificially raise the pool level, pardon me, was probably a bad thing. I noticed there's also a question about ongoing maintenance. Now, I'll just touch on that from our perspective. We did have a stream come down off of a slope in a tributary to the East Branch Brandywine Creek, and with us having changed the level of the creek behind the dam, that has needed to be touched up from time to time. It was seeded and a channel provided to get it to the creek, but over time we are seeing material wash down there, and so there is some ongoing maintenance to kind of find find that balance, find that connection between either a creek or an artificial drainage pipe that used to go into the stream channel. Now we have to find a balance for that along the way. So there is some maintenance in that respect.
Craig, can you elaborate on, Dr. Kaufman responded to the Wilmington. He had said that their modeling and engineering shows that actually because of the steepness of the gorge there, that they believe taking the dams out would actually alleviate some flooding in the future, right?
Yes, he did. Brian and I had a chance to talk with Dr. Kaufman earlier, and they have a fairly steep gradient at that point, and the dams, I believe, artificially raised the normal base flow, a sunny day flow, so that it would be closer to the floodplains. So when Ida came along, there was less, it was easier access for floodwaters to get away from the stream, away from the floodplains, and to go into neighborhoods. I think he mentioned a parking garage that was heavily damaged because of Ida, and I understand that the university or somebody associated with Jerry did some modeling and determined that without the dams there, that flooding would not have reached the parking garage. And any kind of obstructions in the creek, are gonna result in impacts somewhere else along the outside of the channel, whether it's a bridge, a dam, or even just natural conditions like a tree falling over from the bank. It can cause problems.
So we're at 229, Brian. Brian Fedino, that is.
Yes, I guess at this point, thank you very much, Craig and Brian. Fantastic presentations, very informative, some very excellent information for other organizations and partners interested in undertaking planning and implementation activities surrounding dam removal. Fantastic information, gentlemen, and we thank you very much for that. So I'm afraid it's time to wrap up our session. Again, wanted to thank our speakers. Thank you also to the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And thank you for taking the time to share your expertise with all of us during this week of the 2021 Schuylkill Watershed Congress event. Have a great afternoon.